Hi, I'm Peter.
I'm Saddia. I'm Lauren.
Hey, I'm Ian. And today we want to have a conversation that's a little bit sensitive. We want to talk about the things that are happening in our country right now. And I know if it were me, I would pause right there and probably switch podcasts because I know you've probably heard so many different things, so many voices, but give us a chance to explain. So today we want to talk about the things that are happening in our culture, but not just reiterate the words that other people have been saying. Our purpose here is not to retweet some influencer's opinion or try to make ourselves seem like we know what's going on or make our church seem cool. Our purpose is really to ask a question, and that is, with all that's going on, with all the voices that I'm sure are coming at you, they're coming at each of us, with all of the suggestions about how we should feel, what we should do. What does the voice of Jesus have to say in this time? What does Jesus have to speak into what is happening in our country right now, into the pain, into the heartbreak, into the confusion? So into that, I want to ask Peter, what do you feel like Jesus is speaking to our culture, to each of us right now?
Yeah. It's a difficult question to answer. Because theologically speaking, I can answer it immediately. But, we have to recognize one thing, that this has affected us social, spiritually. Bio is the physical part, the anxiety, and the physical symptoms that have showed up, the whatever type of dynamics of oppression, that's happening in one shape or in one direction or another. Then there's the emotional sense, the psychological, the trauma and all that stuff. And then there is also the sociological part, which is our relationships and stuff like that. And then God. Where is God?
Yeah.
And the big question. So, and then you have all the sociological scenarios that are going on. So this it's a big discussion, and it's hard to bite the cookie. If I can put it that way, yeah.
Bite the cookie. Is it a hard cookie?
It's a very loaded with a lot of calories cookie kind of deal. There's tons of fudge and chocolate and so on, and one bite
is messy.
Yeah,
it's not gluten free.
It's not gluten free. So I would like to depart from two places, actually, from the Old Testament and New Testament. Old Testament is the first part of the Bible. If you're not familiar with the Bible, the first part of the Bible has 39 books, and then the second part of the Bible has 27. And the second part is where we have the person of Jesus, walking with us. And the first part is where God is creating and he's forming, and there's this thing that happens, and there's sin, and all this starts going on, and then we have this downhill momentum. Then he picks up people, and then he walks with these people until the time of the New Testament. So that was very, very, very summarized. But
yeah,
that was a good summary, though. It's like a storybook.
From the Old Testament, we have something very interesting. The Bible begins with this phrase, and the phrase is, in the beginning, God created. In the beginning. And just in the beginning alone, the bereshit, right? That's the Hebrew word. That in the beginning, God created. One of the purposes of the author in writing this is to in a very Asian Near East world where there's a lot of gods, he's making a statement that this is not a pantheism. This is not a lot of gods dealing with. This is the God, the supreme God, the ultimate God. He is creating. He is taking moment right now, and what I like about it is that in this creational history that he shares with us in the first chapter of Genesis, he says, I'm going to make man in our own image. And then it says male and female. So male and female are made in the image of God. Okay?
Yeah.
So the first thing we need to consider here, the first thing for discussion is this. We were talking about this, how the cry is important. It's important that we cry out. It's important that we share our thoughts. It's important that we share our hearts, what's going on, our pain, our anguish, and all those things. But there's a difference between just a social cry.
Yeah.
And the cry that is determined to say, God, bring what the Bible calls dikaiosune, which is the justice of God. And the justice of God is a justice that is acting in history, right? And something interesting about that is that in a postmodern world, or in a postmodern world, or in a post-truth world, however you want to put that,
Sure.
We have a lot of relative truth. So you're right, I'm right, you're right, we're all right.
All right.
Yeah.
So I can, within this, if we're going to cry, a lot of people are crying, and each one are crying according to the postmodern scenario. Each one is crying to their own truth.
Yeah.
It's to get a gist of this. It's like, if you ever seen an anime, in the anime world.
You're an anime, Peter?
I'm not into anime, but I know about anime. And interesting enough that within in anime shows kind of the Japanese culture. So this is my truth, and I need to redeem myself, and my truth might be different than your truth. And so you have a truth, I have a truth. But the problem is that these truths, when they meet each other, they collide, and injustice shows up. You see. And so if we're going to cry, and just in the social justice scenario, just as a sociological phenomenon, then, we have to go to, what is your anchor? We have to ask the question, what is your anchor? Because I have a truth and you have a truth. You see? And so I can, I remember listening to this one speaker, and he said, a murderer can say, well, this is my truth. And, how can you argue against my truth? It's my truth. You see, and so where's the sense of there has to be an anchor. There has to be a departing point. And so that's the dikaiosune, the justice of God brings that departing point where God says, you are made in my own image. And that's why I am against oppression. I am against all sorts and forms of hating, or any form of hurting, or any form of, and that has many forms, and so God says, I made you in my image, and so you are part of me, and so I'm inviting us to be in community and to love each other. And if that's our departing point, then we have a truth, and a truth that tells us that if I hurt you, there's something wrong with that. If I oppress you, there's something wrong with that. If I take you as a joke, I don't take you serious, I devalue you in some shape or form. And this is, this transcends just, the scenario that we're living right now. But there's so many forms of bullying, and so many forms of oppression, and so many forms of devaluing. When I do that, I'm doing something wrong, because I'm hurting a person who's made in the image of God.
So that's the difference. What I'm hearing you say is that there's a difference between two people who have their own truth, who just say, hey, you violated my truth, and then just trying to stop them based on that, versus being able to say, hey, that was wrong based on how we were made. That's something that is actually wrong based in something really deep in my DNA and my essence.
Yes, and so if you put it within this context, if you put the cry, the lament, the voice lifting up and saying, Lord, where are you? There's a reason for that. It falls into, Lord says, yes, there's something wrong. If we treat each other this way, there is something wrong. And so and you know, let me take a little curveball here, because if we as a church use the same type of lingo or the same type of actions, and we're doing the same type of things, then what is the difference? You see, for those who believe in God, we are to be the upside down kingdom. We are to provide a alternative space to listen to the cry, and not only listen, be present with it. Not only be present with it, act on it. You see, and how do we act? You know, and that's the struggle that we have. How do we act? How we are present with a reality. You know, and there's different parts here playing. And how are we present with each one of the parts, and how can we be God's presence in it?
So that was a lot.
That was a lot.
And so really focusing on tying in to like the beginning of the story, which is that, okay, we're made in the image of God, and all the implications there. Lauren or Saddia, is there anything that stirs within you that resonates with that?
I just think like what Peter said and what you said, when you hurt somebody, it like something is wrong, you know, it kind of raises a red flag, and that really proposes for a person to ask themselves, before I do something, before I do like or say something, like what do I base my truth on? Like on what do I base my truth on to make these actions, these opinions, you know? So I think that's important, like, especially like for Christians. When we enter like an outside world, we see the world differently, you know? There's like that Christian filter. But what do we base our truth on? Like you said, like I'm a murderer or like something like that. A murderer can say they have a truth, but on what values and like what, like something like that, what do you base your truth on? You know what I mean?
And that's, you know, that's my argument against, and I say this with sensitivity, but my argument is to get a humanistic point of view. Because from a humanistic point of view, if we depart from that postmodern arena, it's, you know, it's the same. In the Bible, we have a context like that. We have all these gods, and we have these, let's say, this one kingdom face the other kingdom where they had their God, and this other kingdom had their God. And so let's face off. And so if I win and I'm stronger, then my God is stronger than your God. And we just roll over, you know. And God says, no, that's not the way. You know, God says, I'm going to show another kingdom. So comes in Jesus, and Jesus brings in this teaching called the Sermon on the Mount. And in the Sermon on the Mount, it leaves us helpless. You know, because the problem, and this brings another discussion, but I'm going to go very fast on it. The problem is that we see Christianity, a lot of us see Christianity as don't do and do.
Yeah.
Like, what do I do wrong? What do I do right? And if I do enough right, then God will do something or give me something good, you know, some sort of things. And that's not this at all. You know, if that's your Christianity, when you're faced with the Mount of the Sermon, the Sermon redefines the law. I mean, and the stakes are really high.
Yeah.
He says, and Jesus redefines it. He says, "You heard it said, but I say."
Yeah.
And he says something, you know, like, you know, you heard it said that adultery, you know, is wrong, but if you're looking at a woman and in your heart you're looking at it in a certain way, you have committed adultery.
Yeah.
So it went from the action of committing adultery to something that is
what's within.
That's
Deeper.
within, deeper, yeah, and it's right there, etc. And so it leaves you. And so in this case, you know, Jesus is trying to say, hey, there's a practice. And there's this podcast you sent me by Mark. I forgot his
John
last
Mark
name.
Comer.
Yeah. And
Something.
he speaks about the praxis of the Sermon on the Mount and how many times it's repeated. And within this practice is how are we present with each other in community? How do we love each other in community? And community, there are risks. There's a blessing in community, and there's hurt in community. But if we're creating a community in which we grow together,
Yeah.
you know, those risks are always going to be present. There's always going to be lesson. There's going to be hurt, and we keep on growing. And that's very simplistic, you know. But yeah,
What I'm hearing you say is that what Jesus is speaking into this cultural moment is that, one, that we were created in the image of God. And so our lives actually matter and they have purpose. And we can really say, hey, what just happened is wrong. Hey, whenever someone hurts and imposes on another person, that is wrong. So we see that where Jesus is saying, hey, that there is injustice. I also hear you saying that Jesus is offering us another way through the Sermon on the Mount, and for those who aren't familiar with that, that's Jesus' words in Matthew 5, and where he's talking about, hey, this is what it looks like to live in my kingdom. So, in other words, in those words, Jesus is saying, hey, this is another way to live. Hey, why don't you try living in this way? He's inviting us, in other words, into a different way.
And it's a very dangerous way of living, if you ask me.
Tell us more about that.
Because where people reject, the people of God embrace. Where people push away, the people of God bring together. There's options, there's possibilities. Because remember, the thing about Jesus is that he says, you know, we are worse, you know, than we think, but I love you. And I'm gonna go, I'm gonna do everything I can to reach you and invite you to this journey. And I'll be by your side. I'm not gonna just leave you alone. You see, and so that's important. You know, those kind of values of knowing that we can make mistakes. You know, but we don't have to reject each other. But we can say, okay, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Can I apologize to you? Yes. Let's live together. You know, let's do that, living that journey together. It's a different type of culture.
Saddia, what do you think that these words, so what Jesus, you know, what Peter's saying, hey, this is what Jesus is trying to speak to us today. What do you think that means to you? Or
I mean, to me, of course, it's like, wow, how can that be like something? You know, how can I be so imperfect and still be able to walk with Christ? You know? But I think that brings us to our next point. It's like, how does this culture, like, tell us who we are, kind of thing? Like, this cultural moment, how does it define how we are as Christians? Like, how we act in this moment, which is a point that you were talking about earlier, which I would love for you to, like, reiterate and, like, talk to us about a little bit more, because it's something that's so relevant to right now. And I think it does tie into what Peter's saying.
Something that I've noticed is, and we were having this conversation before, but I think something that I've noticed is that this cultural moment is telling us something. It's telling us something about who we are. It's telling us something about our purpose. It's telling us something about our origins. It's telling us something about, like, what the purpose of life is. And I think it has to do with this concept of story. John Mark Comer also talks about how the stories that we believe are really influential in shaping us and shaping our character and shaping our actions. And what's happening right now, this cry for justice, really doesn't make sense in the context of the story that we're told so many times. What's a story that we're told so many times through education, through really culture? The story is that we are animals. We are accidents. Leo Tolstoy puts it in this way, and I think it's like one of those gut level things. You are an accidentally united little lump of something. That little lump ferments. The little lump calls that fermenting its life. The lump will disintegrate, and there will be an end of the fermenting and of all of the questions. In other words, it's meaningless. And this is a story that we're told so many times, that we're just this piece of matter just passing through life. And if that is the real story, if that really is who we are as people, then what's happening right now doesn't make any sense. What right do we have to demand for justice? And this kind of goes back to what you were saying, Peter. What right do we have to demand for justice and for people to act in a way that's decent to other people if there is no meaning and purpose in life? What right do we have? But if there's another story, if there's a story that is a story that you were telling before, Peter, that I think Jesus is trying to tell us right now, that, hey, you actually do matter. You were created by a God who says that he is love. And so you most thrive and you're most human whenever you love God, whenever you love yourself, and whenever you love others. That's what Jesus said. You're most human whenever you're living in that love. If that's really who we are, then it makes so much sense. The reaction that we're seeing makes so much sense. We should feel something in our heart that breaks whenever there is death, whenever there is oppression, whenever there is injustice. And I think people on both sides, of course there's going to be exceptions, but I would say the vast majority of people on both sides would agree with that what happened is wrong, that what happened is inhuman. Why do we say that? Inhuman. In other words, it's not the way that God created it to be. And I think that right now, in this moment, Jesus might be telling us, hey, reanalyze what story you're believing. What is that reaction in your heart? What is that gut level anger? What is that telling you about who you are?
And with that, like, I know that since, fun fact, me and Lauren live together. She's like my best friend, but beside the point, I know that especially with the oppression of like the Asians in culture, like I know that you have a couple stories if you're like,
Yeah,
if
for
you're
sure. Like,
comfortable with like sharing.
I'm comfortable, don't
Yeah.
worry. I think it's important and it needs to be talked about, you know? I've definitely experienced like that sudden change in like culture or social culture shift, like between the little exchanges in people. Like even when COVID-19 was very prominent and it was a new virus, you know, people were afraid, and you know, and when people are afraid, they don't know how to act. They don't know how to.
Ooh.
They don't know
You said
how
something.
to.
Can you say that again?
When people are afraid, they don't know how to act.
She's coming at y'all.
So, with that, like I said before, the simple exchanges, even in grocery stores, when we go out in public, you know, I'm Filipino, my family's Filipino, and I know that when COVID was starting, there was a lot of hate, a lot of confusion, anger going towards the Asian community or even Asian descents, you know. And like I said, when people are afraid, they don't know how to act, maybe they don't know how to think, and it's just, it breaks my heart because even when I'm out in public,
It's because they're retweeting.
because they're retweeting.
Anyways, we'll
What
get
do you
to
mean by
that.
okay?
We'll get to
We'll
that.
go into that. Okay.
All right. So like when I'm in Walmart, you know, or in public places even, I receive nasty looks because people are afraid. They automatically assume she has COVID, she has the coronavirus, she's carrying something, you know. And it breaks my heart to see that not just Asians, but literally anybody will receive this kind, because when people are afraid, they'll automatically assume something. They'll write your story for you when it's not who you are. It's not, you know. And it's just really sad to see how people act like this. And when we should be showing and preaching love, you know, that's the truth that we need to be showing others, because that's what Jesus would do. You know, he experienced so much discrimination at himself, but the only thing he showed back was love. And you know, and the crazy thing is that when Jesus died on the cross for us, he was hated by the crowd when he walked with those people, and those people loved him. But when he was on the cross, he was getting hatred, he was discriminated against, but he actually said, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. And I think that's what we need to do. We need to, even though we're receiving the hate, we need to show love back. And I think that's what the community needs to
We need to be in our most human state.
Exactly.
Is to show love.
Wow.
360 back.
No, that's really powerful, because you're saying like even if we're actually the recipients, that you're saying that there needs to be a sense of forgiveness and love, and that is what being most human is.
And it's hard.
Yeah. What
very
do you have
hard.
to say about that, Peter?
It's hard. It's really hard, and within the context that's happening right now, it's really, really hard. You know, the anger, the pain. I mean, if you watch the video, you know what happened to George Floyd. It's painful. you know, and it's heartbreaking, incredibly. And you said something that really caught my attention, which is people write your story for you.
Ooh.
And you know, when does that happen? You know, and this is my 2 cents into that. You know, when does it happen that people write the story when they want to keep distance from you?
Ooh.
You know, when they're not really, when we're really not intentional about having a relationship, we just want to keep distance, and so we let assumptions take place, and we believe the assumptions, we act through assumptions, you know, and I think that's very powerful, you know. Did they write the story for George? You know, did they write the story for him? You know, did they write the story for all these other, you know, people who lost their life because of X, Y, Z? You know, and it goes both ways, because you know within the you know, we have a big community who's in pain and suffering, but
Yeah.
on the other side there is a lot of police officers who have come out and said, hey, you know, I hear your pain and so on, and have been very empathetic and so on. And so there's all these, there's a mix of things happening everywhere, and both sides, and it's
not straightforward.
Yeah, so it's very difficult. So in a sense, you know, I understand the cry, because the cry is necessary, because we're looking for change. At the same time, you know, how does the cry transform into, how do we make the change? How is change going to happen? And I think change, in my thought, you know, change happens at 2 levels. It happens at a systematic level, but it also happens at the individual level. What changes I'm going to make? And one of the things that I think that one is really, really important as the systematic one is. I think that what changes I'm gonna make, you know, because, you know, for example, I moved from Puerto Rico to Texas, and I was a hospice chaplain. Now, as a hospice chaplain, I discovered for the first time, for me, I discovered that there was, you know, this race against this race, that race against this. It was several races against several races.
It's your first time experiencing
And
that
it was my
concept.
first time experiencing, and there was even races against my race, and there was my race against other races. And I was like, what's going on here? And it's because in Puerto Rico, you have all sorts of colors, you know, kind of deal. It's kind of like Skittles, you know.
Oh, dang. You're red.
Yeah. But then I became aware that in Puerto Rico, you know, in my experience, I said, wait a minute, this is happening in within the people I love and care for, you know.
Wow.
And there was something, you know, Dominicans versus Puerto Ricans, Cubans versus Puerto Ricans, Dominicans versus Cubans, Cubans versus. It was this whole thing going on there, and I started becoming aware of it. So it had been happening. I probably was part of the problem. I'm sure I was part of the problem, and all of a sudden I became aware, and I think that's where it is, you know, that awareness is key to not write the story for you. You know, that I start becoming aware that, wait a minute, what are my, you know, I always say this word wrong, prejudice. What are my prejudice, you know, and what is going on here, you know, because the bigger picture is very important. I think right now we're claiming, and I think the community is really rising up for that. But also the small picture gets the ball rolling, you know.
I want to talk about that, and I want to ask you, Saddia, like, we've talked about a lot of, you know, like, I think some helpful ideas, but a lot of them are right. They're a little bit up there in the sense that they're still ideas.
Yeah.
What does this have to do, and for us as individuals, and then for those listening, like, what should we do, like, in light of this, in light of what we've seen, that Jesus is speaking into our situation?
Yeah, it's more like, what should we do as Christians, as humans? As humans, is we need to be honest. honest with ourselves, and that's where the individual change comes from. Because it's true, I've experienced it too. Like, the first time that I truly experienced it was because I'm Puerto Rican. I'm a very white Puerto Rican, see-through. But my aunt and uncle, who they took me in as their own daughter, they are very dark. Like, they are very dark Puerto Ricans. And I was at, I don't remember what restaurant I was at, it doesn't matter. But I had visually seen the way that somebody had acted towards me, other than my aunt, who is a lot darker than I am. And it was very hateful. They looked at us as in like, oh, is this child actually theirs? Like, they thought I was stolen, kind of thing. And I was like, technically, but no. It's the whole mindset, and it does happen within. I think that systematically, of course, like, it needs to be prominent, but if we're all doing our parts to change individually and to be open-minded to change, and just be completely honest with ourselves on everything that's happening, everything that we are doing as a person, and be open-minded to loving one another. Even through our prejudices, through our opinions, we should automatically love, and we should preach love, we should show love. And it seems like you have something to say.
Yeah, no, you just brought something to my mind, and it's Brené Brown, and when she talks about the anatomy of trust, there's one piece of it that really caught my attention is assume generously.
Oh.
And I think that's what you're saying, you assume generously. And that's so important, you know.
Assume that people have good intentions.
Yeah.
Which is very, very hard nowadays. It's very hard because there is so much fear. There's so much evil in the world. And it's awful with the things that have been happening and continue to happen. But I encourage... Sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, what I hear you saying is that, but that's one thing that we can do to be that kingdom that we talked about earlier, to live the way of Jesus, is to assume the best out of others.
Assume the best, preach love, live love, and be open-minded to change, and be open-minded to listen to other people's stories. Not just write their own stories for them. Right. Not assume nothing. Listen to their stories. Which is the most, I guess, the greatest thing that you can do for another human being.
And this is something that each of us have to challenge ourselves to do.
Yeah, we are not perfect.
Yeah.
Us four sit here and we talk, and yes, like, these are our truths and everything. Like, these are hard conversations that we think that need to be had. But the thing is, we all sit here as preachers, as students, as soon-to-be preachers, as just a person. We all sit here and we're not perfect. Like, we all have prejudices against... See, now I'm having a hard time with the word. Prejudices against other people, against ourselves, against our religion, against literally everything in the world. And sadly, that is what society, that is what we have been taught throughout our lives. And these are the opinions and the things that we have learned. Yeah. And so you have... you keep making noises. Like you're ready to talk, like, yes!
Say something after you.
Yeah. But Lauren, you want to say
Lauren.
something?
I think it's important, like what you said about addressing those, like, internal confusions and everything like that. It's a very difficult thing to address the problem, you know. Sometimes you yourself could be the problem. You could be the only person that could be standing in your way is yourself. And I think it is important that people should realize it's important to humble yourself, basically. Humble yourself and realize, what can I be doing better to be a better person? What can I be doing to show the love of Christ, show love, preach love, all that, you know, through my actions, the words I say. Because as you've seen, like, on TV and everything, there's so much more power in unity rather than division. And like what you were talking about earlier about police officers, like, feeling that empathy, you know, like, two different sides, of course, but when you cry out for help, there's that unity for change, you know what I mean? So I just think that it's important to humble ourselves.
There is so much power in unity, too, because, like, it's a lot louder if we yell together than me yelling by myself. And if it's the other way around, where all the hate and the oppression, all of the just bad things, if they yell louder than us as Christians, us as people who want love, who want these things to, like, we don't want to butt heads anymore. Sorry, there's, like, dust everywhere. We don't want to butt heads anymore. We don't want that confusion. We don't want everybody to seem right at the same time when we know our truth. Like, we know Jesus. And if Jesus was, like, if he created us in his image, and we preach love, and we show that he is love, and we're his image, why are we not showing that we're love? Why are we preaching hate? Why are we not preaching, but why are we preaching love and showing hate? Why are we showing all these bad things when we should be on the side of creating a better future?
It's kind of like being creating a hypocrite against your own self
exactly.
and others, right?
It's exactly what that is. And it's something that us as Christians try not to do.
Right.
And, like, we try to preach not to do it. But that's a whole different conversation.
Sure.
A whole different.
This reminded me of that song, like the sheep song, like don't be a hypocrite because they're not hip with it, you know?
Yeah.
Anyways,
know what I mean?
I thankfully have not heard that song.
Oh, it's a great
It's a great song.
Insider language.
It's a great
That
camp
was,
song.
yeah, that is a good song.
So
We'll have to
there's
sing it for you guys one day.
so
Next podcast.
Da, 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 da. Is that the one?
Ba, 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 ba.
So there's right, going back to that conversation of the action steps. So one thing being doing this reflection and looking within. But I'm going to ask a question. Peter, I'm going to kind of put you on the spot a little bit. What are you going to do in order to, like, what is a step that you're actually taking or are planning to take in order to respond to this, or in order to, like, what are you doing right now? What's going through your head?
Well, there's a theological concept that went through my head as I was listening to the conversation, and a story that went to my head. The story was the Syrophoenician woman, or the pagan woman, you know, as they call it.
That's an easier word.
She's begging Jesus, you know, because she's wanting for her child, and she's begging Jesus, and the disciples are like, why don't Jesus just brush her away? Just brush her away, you know, she's not part of us, you know, and Jesus acts indifference, and finally he says some words that are very harsh. He says, it's not good for me to give the food of the children to the dogs. Called her dog, you know, and then she says, but even the dogs eat from the little pieces that fall down from the table.
Yeah.
Amazing faith, you know, and suddenly Jesus, you know, just, I've never seen something like this, and it gives the disciples are been following Jesus, by the way, have been sitting down in the intimate talks, have been, you know, they've been spending time with Jesus, and all of a sudden they get this moment. And I have to think that if I was one of the disciples, I'd be like, dude, I have issues. You know, kind of deal.
It revealed their heart.
Exactly.
Towards others
it reveals,
that are
you know.
different than
Yeah.
them.
And so the closer we come to Jesus, the more that revelation happens.
Wow.
And that it's painful, but it's necessary. It's painful, but it's necessary, because the more I'm closer to him and the more I see the ugliness that abides within me, you know, grace gives me courage to say, Lord, I want to surrender this. This
Wow.
is something, you know, and I want to change, you know, I want to be different, you know. The other,
open to that change.
yeah.
Humble yourself. You know?
Yeah, and so the other one is the word humble. And in the Old Testament, there's a concept, and humility and humanity have the same point of departure. In the Old Testament, when you were humbling yourself, you would, you know, change your clothes, put sackcloth on, start throwing dirt on your head, stop eating, stop drinking, and just like pray completely down on, you know, with your face on the ground, and you're like, and what they were saying is, I'm becoming dust.
Wow.
You see, and where was humanity started? Where? From dust.
Yeah.
Oh, 360.
You see, so by you know, when the people of Israel, you know, they humbled themselves before the Lord. This is the ritual that they follow, and what they were saying is, God, I am dust. You are the Creator. And then when you look to your side, you see, I am dust. You're dust. We are all
Common
dust.
humanity.
Yeah, that's what we have in common. We're united with that point.
Exactly. So the more and this is because a lot of times churches talk about, they minimize the humanity, but in the Bible, the more human you become, the more the more you love those around you, because you become aware that as I am broken, they are broken. We are in the same place.
So good.
And
That's so good.
And then who is the one who can heal us?
Peter, you just said something so important.
So
there.
we come back to made in our own image. That God made us in His own image.
So in light of that, what is that step that you're taking?
So the step that I take is, first of all, I need to sit with my darkness.
Wow.
Because there might be prejudice, there might be things that I'm unaware of, and I need to sit with that, And the only way I know how to do that is coming closer to Jesus. But I can't stop there, because we can be a Christian that just does that, and then rots, because they don't take the joy of life that they have received from Jesus out to the people around them, their world of influence, and so on. And so, I need to come to Jesus. I need to be present. This is my darkness. What is going on? And then I need to go back and say, okay, who have I hurt?
Wow.
That's hard.
And that's hard. And it seems a little extreme. Like one of these extremes. I'm not going to talk with nobody.
Sure.
Kind of deal thing.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
but the reality is that when you become human, and let me use that intentionally now, you become aware. I need to have the conversations. I need to talk. I need to say I'm sorry.
So for you, you're opening yourself up and saying, like, God, what is it within me? And then give me an action step. What is the action step that, like, it's not just reflecting so I can feel bad and then I'll feel better the next day. No, it's like, what do I need to do in order to be my purpose? I want to comment on that really quick. I think you said something really important. And it's been something that's been throughout this entire podcast. And I want to make it very explicit, which is that humanity, we're often told, is this dirty, broken, terrible thing. And we're told that what it is to be human is to be evil. And while there is a sense that we each have struggle and we each have hurt, and so many times we act out of that.
And sin.
But when God looks at us, He says, whenever He first made us, He said this was very good. And whenever we actually become human, we are actually returning to that place. And so whenever we as people of faith talk about those things, we need to remember that at our core, we were made by a God who is love, and that within, at our essence, we are love whenever we start to have that relationship with Him. We start to become more like Him. Whenever we start to remember what was always true all along. I want to add one more action step. Just one more. And that is...
Can I mention something?
Yes.
I'm sorry, but it was too juicy to let it go.
All right.
I've had the privilege to travel to different countries, and I have to confess that every time I visit a country, I get frustrated with it.
Why?
Because it's a cultural shock, because they do things different.
Something new.
Because it's not the same thing I'm used to. It doesn't have my routines.
I feel that.
It doesn't have my things, etc. And so, but there's so much beauty. There's physical beauty and everything, but there's a lot of dynamics that are beautiful too, And I just want to focus on food just for a moment,
We're hungry.
There's a difference. There's a difference eating bread, in Europe than eating bread here in the United States. Over the gluten-free people can eat bread in Europe. But in each culture I've been, when they present their food, it's different. And some of them I like, some of them I'm like, ooh, I'm not gonna taste that. That's I can't, I'm not ready, kind of deal thing. But there's so much beauty in just discovering another culture, discovering the people of the culture, and discovering their ways and understanding their thoughts and why they do things and so on. And suddenly, when you start visiting all these places, there's a wisdom that comes with that. There's a wisdom that comes with that, where you are more understanding.
Wow.
And more open to let me listen to the story before I judge. Wow. And I think that's that aspect of of humanity. That the reality is that we're broken. Let's listen to each other. Let's listen to, and it's hard to listen to a story. It's especially hard when you have broken the broken. It's hard. But if we listen to each other's story, I mean, it will make a world of a difference. And I think that should be an action step. Let's listen to each other's story.
I think within that is kind of a practical way to do that is something that I have a friend, his name's Clay, that he suggested, which is...
What up, Clay?
Yeah.
Hi, Clay, if you're listening.
If you're listening.
Clay, thank you. Because what he told me, he took the time to make this whole, like, really... like artistically, like aesthetically pleasing post. But essentially it boiled down to this: don't retweet. In other words, don't retweet things. Don't retweet things just for your own advantage if you don't really understand them. And so another one of my friends, Alan, pointed out, like, we have a society of retweeters. And it's within me as well. Like, there's such a tendency to want to grab something and then just post it on my social media to help my brand or to make me look good or seem, oh, I'm pretty woke, because I posted this, right?
Yeah,
I'm woke.
There's that tendency, but I think one of the ways that we can take a step back and listen to other people's stories is to don't retweet, listen, take the time, wrestle with God and say, okay, now what is my original thought? What is my voice in this situation?
Listen and then become woke. It's true. It's so true.
Listen first.
It's listen first and then become woke. That is our action step today. Anyways, just closing thoughts, closing statements. To go along with that, let's just implore you guys to continue to change. Like, continue to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Listen to change. Listen to change. Oh my God. Be more open to change. Be more open to listening to other people's stories. Don't write other people's stories for them. Don't assume. Just love and be that love. We're doing this for you guys. And I can't even begin to say how thankful I am for this, because this is eye-opening for me. I don't know if it is for you guys. I can't speak for you guys, but it is for me. And I really hope that at least somebody out there is getting the same thing that I'm getting out of it, or if not more.
Can I say something to the viewers and the listeners real
Yeah.
quick?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to say, like, don't be afraid. This is a time of confusion and everything. Don't be afraid to wrestle internally and with God and, with your problems, because it is important to grow as a person. And like Ian said, don't retweet, say your own truth. Don't let others write that truth for you. And just because you don't retweet something fast, instant, like right away, that doesn't mean you're not doing anything. I feel like people are afraid to...
Just because you're not posting
doesn't mean you're not doing
anything.
Exactly. So don't be afraid to wrestle with that concept, make your own truth. Don't let anybody write it for you. Because you are yourself, and that's you, I just thought that was important to say. So
That's perfect.
Thank you guys so much.
There.
Yeah, that's
There,
right. Don't look at the microphone.
This is not a person.
Thank you guys so much. We're looking forward to hanging out soon. And want to take a second and invite you to church. Canyon Creek Project, we're opening up June 27th. We'd love to see you in person.
Excited.